Welcome back to the deep dive. You know that feeling, right? That little pit of anxiety when you're about to submit a huge paper and you're wondering, did I cite that correctly? Is this maybe too close to the source?
hmm
Well, if that sounds familiar, then this deep dive is absolutely for you.
It is. We're really opening up a big stack of sources today. Everything from
Mhm.
articles, university policies, to research guides.
And we're going to turn all that dense material into something you can actually use.
Exactly. All of our sources, they really boil down to one core idea.
Mm.
Research writing demands, well, honesty. It demands integrity and really the proper handling of ideas.
So our mission for you, the listener, is pretty simple. By the end of this, you'll have a shortcut to being really, really well informed. We're going to define what plagiarism actually means today.
And we'll map out how to avoid it.
And crucially, we're going to demystify those originality check tools that all the institutions are using now. The goal is knowledge that's quick to get, but, thorough.
And the stakes here, they're really high. Our sources all stress this. A breach of academic integrity, and this is the key part, whether it's intentional or completely accidental,
Right.
it carries some pretty severe consequences. It can be failing the assignment, or in really serious cases, even failing the entire course. The burden of proof is always on the author.
And here's the hook. I think this is what challenges what most people think they know. When you hear plagiarism, you just picture someone copying and pasting a whole paragraph.
Absolutely. That's the textbook image.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, that definition is just not enough for the kind of work students do now. The sources are clear. Plagiarism is a much broader concept. It includes improper paraphrasing,
Okay.
missing citations, or even just presenting someone else's core idea as if it were your own. It's about intellectual ownership, not just copying words.
So we have a clear plan for this. First, we're going to define all the different forms of plagiarism going way beyond copy-paste. Then we'll get into the three sneaky types that catch people out.
The aha moments, yeah.
Then we'll get into practical hands-on strategies, your writer's toolkit, and finally we'll pull back the curtain on those originality check tools. So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this definition because it is so much wider than I think people realize, especially if you're new to heavy academic research. You said there are many forms. What are we talking about here?
Well, our sources lay out a pretty comprehensive list, and the thing to remember is that they all result in the same integrity breach. The most obvious one, the one everyone gets, is copying text word for word without quotation marks.
Slam dunk.
That's a clear misrepresentation of who the author is, no question.
But that's the easiest one to spot. I think the real risk for a diligent student, the one who's actually trying, is when they engage with the material, but maybe just don't do it correctly.
Precisely. And that leads us into two related areas. First, there's paraphrasing too closely to the original source.
Right.
You're trying to avoid a direct quote, but the sentence is still structurally just too similar. We'll definitely dig into that one later.
Yeah.
And second, can be a simple logistical mistake,
Mm-hmm.
just missing the necessary citations. You might have paraphrased it perfectly, but without that citation, you're claiming the idea is, common knowledge
Or yours.
or worse, your own. Yeah.
And what about the bigger picture, like the architecture of the paper itself? What if you sort of adopt an expert's whole argument?
That's another big one.
Yeah.
Is using someone's core ideas, their arguments, or their specific data without giving them credit. Ideas are intellectual property, just like the words are.
Hmm.
If the concept is new or specific to a study, you have to credit it. It doesn't matter how well you've woven it into your own essay. That's really the difference between high-level research and just, summarizing.
Now let's go to the more extreme end. What about things like outright fraud or the new challenges with AI?
At the extreme end, you've got submitting work written entirely by someone else. A ghostwriter, a friend, a contract cheating service.
That's just fraud.
It's outright fraud.
Mm.
And speaking of new challenges, our sources are very clear on this. Submitting an entire paper generated by an AI tool and pretending it's your own work is a huge violation of academic integrity.
Right.
AI is a tool, sure, but if you just submit its output without your own deep human analysis, you've broken the intellectual contract of the assignment.
Wait, can we double back for a second? There are two types that I know cause so much confusion. First, self-plagiarism. Reusing your own previous work without permission. How can I steal from myself? I wrote it.
That's the common question, and it makes perfect sense, outside of an academic setting. But inside it, it's not about who owns the words. It's about the promise you make for each specific assignment. It's about demonstrating new learning.
Okay, so each submission is seen as evidence of new work for that specific class.
That specific class, exactly.
So if I wrote a great paper on the Industrial Revolution for my history class, I can't just submit that same paper for an economics class the next semester. Why is that cheating?
Because you're trying to get academic credit twice for one piece of work. The economics course needs you to show new learning, engagement with economic theories, new analysis.
Right, tailored to that course.
Tailored to that course.
Mm.
By submitting the old work, you're sidestepping the learning that's required now. You're basically double dipping. To do that, you'd have to get explicit permission from your current professor first. Otherwise, you're misrepresenting the effort you put in.
That's a really crucial distinction. It's not just about the words being unique, it's about the effort being unique to the assignment.
It is. And that brings us to maybe the most important point in this whole section. It's something that really surprises a lot of learners.
Which is?
The fact that accidental plagiarism is still plagiarism.
I hear you, but in the real world, intent matters, right? If I accidentally left out one citation because I was exhausted, that's different from someone who just copied a whole article on purpose.
Oh, intent definitely matters for the penalty, 100%. An accident might mean you have to resubmit the paper.
Yeah.
Malicious intent could get you expelled.
Okay.
However, from a purely academic standpoint, the standard is clear. The submitted work is either compliant or it's not. If your work contains uncredited material, it violates the integrity standard. The burden is on you to be correct. If you were sloppy, well, it's still a failure to cite.
And that's why we need to be so vigilant. That
Yeah.
sets the stage perfectly. If even accidental plagiarism is still a violation, we need to know where all the hidden traps are.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how often people miss the nuance. They think they know the rules. But these next three types are the ones most likely to get flagged by a tool or an experienced professor.
These aren't about being malicious. They're more about a failure in method.
A failure of method, a failure of synthesis.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's start with the one with the best name and probably the most common mistake for students who are really trying. Mosaic or patchwork plagiarism.
This is the absolute definition of trying to scoot the rules without actually doing the intellectual work. Mosaic plagiarism is when you try to paraphrase, but you only change a few words. You swap some nouns, find a synonym for a verb.
The classic thesaurus problem.
Classic thesaurus problem.
Yep.
But you keep the original source's structure, its syntax, its flow. It's a surface level change, and it's not enough because the unique structure still belongs to the original author.
And this is where the originality check tools are so good, right? They're not just looking for word matches, they're seeing the patterns in the sentences.
They see the structural similarity immediately. Let's walk through a concrete example from our source material to make this really clear.
Okay.
So imagine an original sentence from a research paper. Sleep deprivation significantly reduces concentration and decreases complex memory performance in adult test subjects. It's a clear, specific statement.
Right. And a student knows they can't quote it, so they try to paraphrase. They open up the thesaurus.
Right, and they end up with what our source calls a bad paraphrase, a textbook mosaic attempt. Lack of sleep substantially decreases focus and lessens the ability to remember complex information in adult study participants.
I see. It looks different. On the surface, they change deprivation to lack of sleep, reduces to decreases. But why is it still plagiarism?
Because the underlying grammatical scaffolding is identical. It's still subject plus verb plus object one plus object two.
Yeah.
The flow, the causal relationship, it's all exactly the same. You've just substituted words. You haven't synthesized the idea.
So how do you break that scaffolding? What does a good paraphrase look like? The kind that's actually original.
A good paraphrase requires you to do three things. Change the vocabulary, yes. But more importantly, change the grammatical structure and change the sequence of the information. Look at the successful example from the source. It says, when adult test subjects do not obtain sufficient rest, their capacity to focus and their ability to successfully retain complex data becomes significantly impaired.
Ah, that's a total transformation. It starts with a completely different clause. When adult test subjects. The original started with sleep deprivation. It completely flips the focus.
That's the key. You've reversed the clause order. You've changed the verb from an active reduces to a more descriptive becomes impaired. You've introduced new grammatical elements. This shows you absorbed the meaning and then explained it in your own rhetorical style.
You're not just changing words, you're rebuilding the sentence from the ground up. That's a huge aha moment.
It is. Now moving on to the second type, which seems so simple but is maybe the most forgotten rule, idea plagiarism.
This is where I think students say, but I wrote it in my own words, so I don't need a citation.
And that is the fundamental error. Idea plagiarism is the simple requirement to cite the source of the core concept, the argument, the data, even if you have paraphrased it perfectly.
Can you give us a clear scenario for that?
Sure, imagine you're writing about behavioral economics. You discuss nudge theory. You can describe that theory in 1,000 different ways, but if your understanding comes from the work of Thaler and Sunstein, you have to credit them.
Because the idea itself isn't yours.
The idea itself, the heavy lifting of creating that theory, belongs to them. If you don't cite them, you are implicitly claiming that you came up with the concept of nudge theory.
So the skill of paraphrasing doesn't cancel out the need for citation. Citation is for the origin of the thought, not just the language.
Precisely. If you are relying on an expert's analysis or their data to build your argument, you are intellectually indebted to them. You have to acknowledge that debt.
Okay, finally, let's go deeper into self-plagiarism. We touched on it, but why does the university treat my own past work like it belongs to someone else?
It comes back to that integrity contract for each specific learning objective. When you submit a paper you wrote for another class, you're violating that contract. The assumption is that for every assignment, you're demonstrating new, original engagement with the material for that course.
Let's use a specific example. Say I'm in a history class and a research methodology class. I write a big literature review on the Crimean War for the history class. Can I just reuse that as the intro for my methodology paper on historical sourcing?
No. You're trying to meet two different learning objectives with one single effort. The history paper graded your knowledge of the Crimean War. The methodology paper needs to grade your new skills in sourcing for that class. By reusing the content, you're not doing the work required for the methodology course.
So the default rule has to be generate new material for every single assignment, unless
the instructor explicitly and clearly gives you permission. That's the only exception. And even then, you usually have to cite your own previous work to be transparent. It's about demonstrating intellectual growth, not just being efficient.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. We've defined the problem, we've laid out the pitfalls. Now let's build the writer's toolkit for actually preventing it. These are the habits you want to adopt.
Exactly. These are strategies that change how you interact with your sources from the very beginning, so that plagiarism becomes almost impossible by design. You're not fixing it at the end, you're preventing it from the start.
And it all begins with note-taking. The sources say you should be taking notes in your own words, but honestly, that feels like it doubles the time I spent on research at the start. Is it really worth it?
It is. The justification is that you trade a little bit of time up front for massive time savings and zero plagiarism risk later. It's the single most effective way to prevent that mosaic plagiarism we talked about.
How does it work in practice?
When you find a key piece of information in a source, you do not copy and paste the sentence into your notes, even with quotation marks.
You're not just recording the quote, you're recording the fact.
Exactly. You have to immediately summarize and synthesize that information in your own voice right then and there. It forces a mental filter. You can't just transcribe, you have to process and internalize it.
So, a week later, when I go to write the actual paper, I'm not looking at the original author's beautiful phrasing. I'm looking at my own, probably more awkward, summary of the idea.
Precisely. You've already broken the linguistic tie to the source. The idea is logged. The citation is right there next to your summary, and you're writing from your own synthesis. It guarantees originality from the first draft.
That leads directly to the next skill, paraphrasing deeply. If someone is just used to swapping synonyms, how do they break that habit?
It's a three-step method. First, read the original passage until you completely understand the idea. Then, and this is the crucial part, put the source away. Close the book, minimize the window.
Get it out of your sight.
Get it out of your sight. Second, write down the idea from memory using a totally different sentence structure. Reverse the clauses, change the emphasis. Third, only after you've written your version, you go back and compare it to the original, just to make sure you kept the meaning but not the structure.
Putting the source away is the key. It forces you to rely on what's in your head, not what's on the screen.
That's the litmus test. If you can only paraphrase while looking at the original, you're going to fall into the mosaic trap.
Okay, next. Quotations. I think a lot of students lean on direct quotes because it feels like the safest way to avoid plagiarizing. But our sources say you have to be very strategic with quotations.
The principle is simple. Use them sparingly. They're like a powerful spice, not the main ingredient. Your paper is about your analysis, your argument, not just a string of other people's voices.
Yeah.
If your paper is 30% quotes, you haven't written an analysis. You've written an anthology.
So when is a direct quote actually necessary?
There are really only three good reasons. One, for formal definitions, like a piece of law or a technical term that has to be exact. Two, for a really powerful or unique phrase where paraphrasing would just kill the impact.
Right.
And three, if you're analyzing the author's specific language itself, like in a literary analysis paper. Otherwise, if you can paraphrase it well, you should. The default should always be to paraphrase.
And now for the absolute rule, the citation rule.
This is non-negotiable. You must cite everything that is not your own original thought, your own data, or widely accepted common knowledge.
Even if you paraphrased it perfectly.
Even if you did the three-step deep paraphrasing method. If the idea came from a source, it gets a citation. Period.
And finally, the logistical habit that holds us all together, source tracking discipline. I think everyone has had that 2 a.m. panic trying to find a page number you forgot to write down.
That panic is a direct result of poor discipline earlier on. You have to be meticulous. Keep a detailed record of all your sources while you're taking notes. Authors, titles, page numbers, all of it linked directly to the point you took from it.
It's really a self-care measure as much as an integrity measure. It saves you from that last-minute stress.
And from accidental plagiarism. Now that we have this toolkit, it brings up a really important question. How are institutions even checking this? What do those tools, the ones that everyone's a bit scared of, actually do?
Right, because for a lot of students, something like Turnitin just feels like this mysterious, all-powerful integrity police.
And that fear can lead people to do weird things, like trying to trick the system, which never works.
So let's pull back the curtain. What are the common university tools that you're going to encounter?
I think Turnitin is the big one, right?
Turnitin is the global standard, yeah. But you'll also see things like SafeAssign, which is often built into Blackboard, or Authenticate for grad-level work. And many learning systems, like Canvas, have their own internal checkers now.
So you upload your paper and the machine starts comparing it. What is it comparing it against? I know it's a huge database, but what's actually in it?
It's a system of, well, gargantuan scale, and it's checking it against three main repositories. First, professional academic databases, millions of published journals, textbooks, conference papers.
So if you copy from a peer-reviewed article, even a really obscure one, it will find it.
It will find it instantly. Second, and this is critical, it compares against previous student papers. Your paper is checked against every other paper submitted at your university, and often its partner schools, for years. Let's pause on that. That's what catches self-plagiarism, right? Or if someone tries to use a paper a friend wrote 3 years ago.
Precisely. If that paper was submitted in 2018, the tool will flag a high match rate in 2024. That's the mechanism that enforces the self-plagiarism rule. And third, it checks against a massive, constantly updating archive of online sources and websites, Wikipedia, blogs, news sites, essay mills. The net is incredibly wide.
Okay, so let's get practical. The student gets a report back, they see a score and a detailed breakdown. Interpreting these indicators is where the real skill comes in.
The two key things you see are the similarity score, the percentage, and the source report. The score is what causes all the anxiety.
Yeah, you see 45% and you think your academic career is over.
Right. But that number is pretty much useless without the context you get from the source report. That's the truly crucial document. It's a color-coded report that shows you exactly where the matches are and links you to the original source. It's your roadmap for how to fix things.
So let's talk about understanding the score. Why doesn't a high score automatically mean you've plagiarized?
Because the tool is a pattern matcher, not an integrity judge. Imagine you have a long 500-word block quote from a famous speech. You put it in quotation marks, you cite it perfectly.
Which is academically fine.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
But the tool will still register that as a 100% match, and that will drive your overall score way up. It's a match, but it's not plagiarism.
So the key is to use the report to figure out why the score is high. If it's not correctly quoted material, what is it usually pointing to?
It almost always points to one of two failures. First, poor paraphrasing, that mosaic plagiarism we talked about. The sentence structure is just too similar. Or second, too many direct quotes, maybe ones you forgot to put quotation marks around.
Okay, action step. Your paper comes back with a 35% score. Before you panic, what is the very first thing you should do?
You use the filters in the report. Most tools let you exclude citations, bibliography, and small matches. First, filter out your bibliography. That alone can knock 5 or 10% off the score. Then filter out small matches, like common phrases of 7 words or less.
And after you apply those filters, what you're left with are the real problem areas.
Exactly. You're left with the big blocks of text where your paraphrasing was too weak. You've just used the tool to isolate the actual fixable issues.
So what's a good benchmark? What's a safe score to aim for?
Well, you have to check your university's specific policy, but our sources suggest a general guideline. A good similarity score, after you've applied those filters, is often considered to be below 20%. If you aim for 15–20%, you're usually in a safe zone, but you still have to manually check that every one of those percentage points is properly cited.
Okay, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The conversation around academic integrity has been completely upended by generative AI. It's a powerful tool, but where does it fit into this whole landscape?
It is, without a doubt, the most complex challenge to academic integrity in a generation. The core question isn't whether AI is useful. It clearly is. The question is whether using it crosses that line into myth representing who the author is.
The line between AI as a co-pilot versus AI as a substitute author.
That's the line, exactly.
So let's start with the green light. What are the permitted uses of AI? How can it actually help a student without violating integrity?
It can be a fantastic assistant. For instance, it can help you understand complex source material. You can ask to summarize a dense article or define a difficult term. The AI is just helping you comprehend. You're still doing the thinking.
And it seems like a great tool for just polishing the mechanics of your writing.
Absolutely. AI is excellent for improving grammar, flow, and clarity. It can even suggest different ways to rephrase your own ideas, acting like a super advanced thesaurus, which can actually help you achieve that deep structural paraphrase we were talking about earlier.
So if I have my argument and I ask the AI to suggest 3 different ways to phrase my conclusion, that's okay.
That's augmentation. You're still directing the analysis. The AI is just polishing the delivery. You can also use it to generate potential research questions to help you get started. In all of these cases, the intellectual core, the argument, the synthesis, is still your work.
Now for the red line. The firm boundary. Sources are very clear on this. AI should not be doing the core analytical work that's being graded.
This is non-negotiable. The contract of an assignment is that the writing reflects your unique critical thinking. So you have to be able to demonstrate 3 things: a real understanding of the ideas, a personal paraphrasing style, and the generation of original analysis and interpretation.
So if I ask an AI, write me an essay arguing that the gold standard was bad for global trade, and I submit what it gives me, that's a violation.
That's the core violation. You are submitting the AI's interpretation and synthesis as your own. And even if the detection tools are still a bit inconsistent right now, and they are, the integrity risk is about the principle. It's not about what can be caught. It's about honestly representing your own intellectual effort.
So this all comes down to transparency.
Completely. A lot of institutions are now requiring a disclosure statement, a little note explaining how you used AI. If you used it to proofread, you say so. If you use it to generate your actual argument, well, you've crossed the line. It's a tool for refinement, not a replacement for your own thought. So before you hit that submit button, we need a final check. We've covered the theory, the pitfalls, the strategies, the tools. Now we need to connect all of that back to the bigger picture.
This is the final review. Let's run through the originality checklist, a 7-point mental scan you can do right before the deadline.
Okay, start with the mechanics.
First,
Was the information paraphrased properly? Did you really absorb the idea and rewrite it from the ground up, avoiding that mosaic trap? Second, were copied sentence structures actively avoided?
and what about giving credit where it's due?
Third, and this is so important, were all idea theories and data cited? This catches that idea plagiarism. And fourth, were direct quotations limited and used only when absolutely necessary? Does the paper sound like your voice, or just a collection of other people's voices?
And then checking for authorship and effort.
Fifth, does the writing genuinely sound like me, my voice, my style? This is your check against self-plagiarism and also against generic AI output. Sixth, was the paper checked on a tool like Turnitin? And did I actually analyze the report? Did you use the filters and fix the problem areas?
And the final check for AI.
Seventh, if AI was used, was its function strictly limited to grammar and clarity assistance? And was the core argument entirely my own? If you can say yes to all 7, you've done your due diligence.
But beyond this checklist, our sources get at a much deeper reason for all of this. What is the deeper why behind this whole focus on originality?
The deeper why is that the purpose of academic writing is often misunderstood. It's not always about creating something brand new that no one has ever thought of before. Most research is about building on existing knowledge. It's about demonstrating how you engage with those ideas.
So it's the framework of the argument that matters most.
Exactly. The sources are so clear on this. The truly original elements, the parts that show you're learning, are your unique organization of the research, your interpretation of the data, and the specific argument you build with it. The materials might be sourced, but the architecture must be yours.
That's the intellectual responsibility. It's not just a technical error, like a typo. It's about respecting the work that came before you.
And being serious about contributing your own honest analysis to the conversation. That's what academic integrity really is.
That was a really crucial deep dive.
Yeah.
So to quickly recap, the definition of plagiarism is huge, covering everything from mosaic plagiarism to self-plagiarism. Success really comes down to deep structural paraphrasing. And while tools like Turnitin are important, it's the source report, after you've used the filters, that gives you the real roadmap for revision, not just that raw percentage score.
Right. And all the sources come back to this idea that your originality is found in your unique interpretation and argument. So the most critical step isn't just checking boxes on a list. It's genuinely investing your intellectual voice into the work. That's what defines your integrity.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to think about. Since AI can now produce coherent, well-structured arguments, how is the academic world going to have to evolve its definition of original analysis? What specific human element will be required to prove that the work reflects a student's unique critical thinking beyond just good grammar and structure?
That is the question that's going to define the future of learning. It's something to keep exploring.
Thank you so much for joining us on this critical deep dive. We hope you feel equipped and ready to tackle your next research paper with confidence and impeccable integrity. We'll catch you next time.